But I want to spend most of this podcast getting into some battles we could start to see develop in training camp. So I have a couple that I'm looking out for, but I want to first get your take. What training camp battles do you think are really going to transpire? What do you think are the biggest training camp battles and the biggest competition going into training camp this year?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at things. Personally, I want to see the defensive back issues.
Yeah.
Is Jeff Okudah going to win that right cornerback spot? Or could you see maybe Mike Hughes battle him for it? And I know that originally when Mike Hughes was brought here, that it was like, oh, he's going to slide and play that nickel spot. But maybe now with the addition of Clark Phillips through the draft, that's something Clark Phillips. I want to see how the cornerback spot opposite A.J. Terrell and the nickel position play out. So to me, that secondary is going to have a thing. I expect Richie Grant to be the starting strong safety with the addition of Jesse Bates, and I think Jalen Hawkins will probably be the second guy there. So there's that one, and I'll go with the second one before we get to yours.
Yeah.
But what happens in the linebacker room? I expect Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis to be your inside linebackers, depending on how they run things. But if they are looking at staying with the 3-4, which I was led to believe that would be quote unquote their base, even though they're going to have so many different fronts, multiple fronts, which I was also told. I expect those two, but what happens with Michael Walker? Is he able to push one of those guys? Because I know that Ryan Nielsen was huge on Troy Anderson when he came here, and obviously Caden Ellis is someone he's big on because he brought him in here with him. So that's a room that I'm looking at as well, where how some of those battles kind of could line up.
You hit the nail on the head with the defensive backs. That has to be the number one position group. Every Falcons fan needs to have their eyes on is the cornerback spot, because again, is Jeff Okudah going to prove himself to be that other guy that lines up on the outside on Sundays across from A.J. Terrell? You would like him to be. You brought him in so he could be that. And he just has to prove that, he can be that dude. He can stay healthy. He can stay on the field. He can perform at a high level and, play up to the potential that, he was supposed to have and has with as being the number 3 overall pick back in 2020. And then in that slot position, I think that could be, I think Clark Phillips could really give Mike Hughes a run for his money. And like you said, I don't want to discredit Mike Hughes. He could give Jeff Okudah a run for his money in that other outside spot. But I think it could be a real battle between Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips for that nickel spot. So that's going to be interesting to watch out for. You gave one that I think could be a little bit more of a battle between Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins. Now, the expectation definitely is for Richie Grant to win that safety spot next to Jesse Bates, because Richie Grant was a second overall pick. If I'm not mistaken, the Falcons, they traded back. I'm sorry, they traded back. I was going to say traded up, but they traded back and actually got Richie Grant. But still, second round pick. And this is a guy who you want to start seeing take leaps every single season. He definitely made a step up last season from year 1 to year 2. Now going from year 2 to year 3, you expect him to really make some big development leaps, and you want to see him contribute. But I don't want to discredit Jalen Hawkins. And I know you weren't discrediting Jalen Hawkins. I'm not saying that, but I think
a little bit. Little bit, but go ahead. I'll let you finish on Jalen Hawkins, and I want to chime back in on that.
I think Jalen Hawkins could be a little bit more competition to Richie Grant than maybe suggested. Now, again, I think Richie Grant will end up winning that position, but I think it'll be a little bit tighter competition between Jalen Hawkins and Richie Grant.
Yeah, look, I don't think Jalen Hall. Jesse Bates is here because they didn't believe in Jalen Hawkins.
True.
And let me put it this way. I do not care what the company line is with, hey, we play the best players. Richie Grant was your second round draft pick in your first draft class.
For sure.
He got better as year one went on in a difficult defense. He got better in year two. Still made some mistakes, but got better. I would be shocked if another regime's draft pick was starting over this regime's draft pick come opening weekend against the Saints. Shocked. I just don't. Sorry. I'm sorry. Excuse me, against the Panthers.
Just what it is.
I don't know why I said the Saints. The Panthers. I apologize. Sorry, but no, I don't believe it. I just don't think it's a possibility. Unless there's an injury. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I just don't see it happening. I really don't. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Know-it-all or Mr. that guy. You don't go sign guys for that big of contracts if you believe the other guy is the guy. And it would be a change of position for Jalen Hawkins as well. So I think the writing's on the wall where he'll be a future backup or possibly he's going to be looking for a new team after this season.
It's definitely going to be Sergey, but that is a good point that you make about the change of position, because if he slotted over to play that position that Richie Grant was going to play, he would be it's a safety, but he'd be out of position between strong safety and free safety. But the other position battle I'm also looking at what is going to transpire when it comes to, honestly, that all right, we know Matt Collins and Drake London, they should be 1 and 2 when it comes to wide receivers. And I know Kyle Pitts, Cordell Patterson, they're going to be in that conversation too, because they're going to play a lot of wide receiver. But when we're maybe talking about just true wide receivers, because Cordell Patterson is going to do a little bit of everything. Kyle Pitts going to play tight end and wide receiver. But we're looking at just strictly people who play, guys who are going to play wide receiver. Drake London, Matt Collins are going to be, those top two guys. Scotty Miller is going to play in that slot. But, who's going to be maybe that other guy that emerges? Is there going to be another guy that emerges? I mean, because you think about it, you maybe aren't pressed if a guy emerges out of that kind of second tier group or not, between the Slade Boldens and maybe the Penny Harts, who I think will do some return things as well, and those guys. So I'm kind of looking to see who's going to emerge out of that group and kind of gets in that kind of first wide receiver tier, and maybe becomes that third guy, that third option or fourth option. So I'm kind of looking at that.
I'll give you a name to mix in there. I think Scotty Miller's got the inside track to that. I'm not going to sit here and BS you. I think he's got the inside track. But a guy that everyone seems to forget about that's still on this roster and still on this team, and who will be returning punts, and his name ain't J.J. Arcia Whiteside. His name's not Penny Hart. His name's not Frank Darby or Slade Bolden.
Are you going Kadero Hodge here?
No. His name is Avery Williams.
Oh,
and Avery Williams has been played running back for this team.
Yeah,
he's a core special teamer who they would love to keep on the roster because of what he does on special teams, and not just returning kicks, but on kickoff kickoff coverage and punt coverage. And I know he's been working out at wide receiver.
Wow, okay.
He's done some things there. So Avery Williams is a guy that I think you could see used as well. I also think that the third receiver spot is going to be one that is an all hands on deck. Well, I think Scotty Miller has the inside track to be, quote unquote, the third receiver.
Right.
I think there'll be games where Cordero Patterson, Avery Williams, Bijan Robinson, Scotty Miller, some of these guys, they get significant time in that slot role or in that third receiver role, just because of things like, we've heard about how Bijan has said that Arthur's going to use him in all ways, and Drake London's like, oh, it's positionless football. So, if I'm not mistaken, Josh Ali, if he's able to make the roster, is a speedster, and it's a guy that you should look out for and being used in a few different ways as well. And again, he's got to make the roster. I think he appeared in a couple of games last year, but so that third receiver spot it's a fun one for you to bring up. I actually love the fact that you bring it up. I don't think you're wrong on saying, hey, there's going to be a battle there, but I think it's going to be a different battle. That makes sense. I think there's a lot of guys that could fill that role, and do different things for you there.
And you bring up a good point too, because really that could, to your point, to piggyback off your point, it could go by kind of what you need that week. Some weeks you may need a guy who is better at taking the top off. So you may see, like you said, more of Scotty Miller, or you could see Ali in that spot. Or maybe you need a bigger guy against a more maybe physical DB, depending on who you're taking on that week. So maybe you do need to see more of a Kadero Hodge, or maybe you do need to see more of a Cordell Patterson, or maybe they have a guy who, is maybe not as good in coverage. So maybe you put a speedier Bijan in the slot. Maybe you see him more in the slot. That goes back to the point of the Falcons being so versatile on offense and having so many guys that can do so many different things. So it could be, like you said, kind of a maybe we say running back committee, maybe a wide receiver 3 by committee, depending on what you need for that week. So that's very interesting that you bring that point up. And I think we could see, like you said, a multitude of different guys kind of fill that role as the season go along, depending on what the Falcons need that week, where it's more of a speedster, more of a possession wide receiver, or things like that. Beau, I do want to bring one more thing up to you as we continue to go through competitions here heading into training camp. Do you have trying to think of the correct word. Do you have a kind of timeline on when Matthew Bergeron should be getting the majority of first team reps? Because it seems like right now he's getting some, but he's not getting the majority. And that's not anything that should be surprising anybody. Arthur Smith, you touched on earlier, is very much a head coach who makes you earn your spot. He's not just going to slot you in there because, you were a first or second round pick, or, you got paid a lot of money, or this, that, and the third. But a lot of people have Matthew Bergeron penciled into that starting left guard spot. Is there a point in training camp, in mandatory mini camp, that Bergeron should take that step and should be in that starting left guard spot and getting most of the reps there?
It's a good question. I think that it's probably something that he'll slowly be worked in during practice and training camp, and maybe during some of the drills. And then I could see him possibly getting, depending on how he's done, possibly getting in there in that first or second game. But I kind of see the method they use a little bit with Jalen, and I don't want to compare him to Jalen Mayfield, but kind of with Jalen Mayfield in the past, where they played him with the first team, and then he stayed and played in them with the second team. And so he gets as many reps in these preseason games as he can to bring him along. I could see something like that with how they bring him along. But look, a lot of it is going to be on what he's doing and how he's working and what progress he's showing. So, yeah, I would say at some point in the preseason, we'll probably see him moved in there more and used more, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to avoid the question, because it's a good question. I just don't know if it's one that it's going to be hard to predict, but I would definitely look for him to be, depending on how he's playing in training camp, moved in and getting some time with the ones. And then look, if he's showing growth and that he can handle that, he'll definitely get in that first preseason game with the ones. But right now he just needs to continue to progress and learn the position. I don't expect him to not be the starter in week one. I expect him to make that transition. I think he's a smart, aggressive player who's good enough to make it. So If not, then it's a little bit disappointing. But moving forward, he is the guy that I think will be and has the inside track to be the starting left guard.
And look, our timeline might be different and maybe doesn't line up with the timeline that Arthur Smith and Dave Ragone have for him. Look, they might be trying to maybe. We're talking about, him being ready for training camp, which I think is very reasonable. I think you would want him starting to get those reps during training camp, but maybe they want him to be sooner, or maybe they won't be as concerned if, it's the second or third preseason game. That might actually be a little late, but you know what I'm saying? The timelines might not add up exactly to what, our timeline is, another fan's timeline is, and what their timeline actually is for Matthew Bergeron when it comes to when he should be getting the majority, the lion's share of first team reps at that left guard position. So, the fact that he's not getting it right now shouldn't be worrisome, even if, he isn't getting the lion's share and mini camp shouldn't be that worrisome. I think you start to, like you said, pay more attention to it when we get into training camp, definitely when we get into the preseason for sure. So we shall see, but definitely the expectation, I think, from everybody, and including Arthur Smith, Dave Ragone, the Atlanta Falcons, is for him to be that starting guy at left guard. But